Hello there, I'm Guildmaster Dan, and obviously this is not this is a vlog. What I'm bringing you guys today, though, is I mentioned before that I was not going to do a review of 5th edition until after the Player's Handbook came out, which I'm still going to do that, but last night I ended up playing in the module that came out with the starter set. And so I got to see some of the mechanics and stuff. So I thought I'd talk to you guys this week about my impressions of 5th edition. So 5th edition seems to me, it looks promising. It does. And from everything I've heard, it seems like the Player's Handbook is going to have a lot for you. And it's going to really be worth your money. It's not a core handbook, but it has a lot of rules options that will allow each dungeon master to really customize it, even beyond their own personal tweaking. From what I understand of it, apparently there will be, at least for some things, there will be multiple mechanics that you can choose from to tailor make your what I guess subsystem you run in. And I look forward to that, especially having played through this starter set of rules. The starter set of rules seems to pull from multiple things, like the most popular. It seems to have pulled from 3.5, 4th edition, and Pathfinder the most. This setup. However, they have done away with some things that give it a more. Cats are fighting. That give it a more. I don't want to say a retro feel, because it's like they did away with things that the old games didn't have, so it feels closer to that. There's just a few mechanics I want to talk about that, at least in this Taylor set, classes no longer have feats. Well, actually, I guess characters no longer have feats, which I agree with. Feats were broken as heck. Now instead, they have their class abilities, which is similar to 2nd edition. And essentially, the way the classes work now is you pick a class, and then you kind of pick a type for that class. So, for example, I was playing a fighter, but my type was a folk hero. So I was more dexterous and good with bows. Now, granted, those could have been just choices that were made for that character based upon his stats. But the folk hero type also informed my background and told me what sort of background I had, and I imagine it also affected my class abilities. I believe the way it works is you end up picking your class, and then you pick your type, and then you can gain class abilities based upon your type. And those are similar to feats, but they're little tweaks to your character that come with. For example, my fighter had Second Wind, which allowed him during combat to roll hit dice to gain back some hit points. Now, granted, those are essentially the way it reasoned out was that's an adrenaline rush. But that's a perfect example of something I wanted to talk about with 5th edition that I noticed. They seem to have taken the concept of healing surges that we saw in 4th edition and in Numenera, and have brought that in here to help groups that are adventuring without a healer. And, I can see the arguments behind it where, when you sit down and rest for an hour, you catch your breath, and you're able to do stuff. It's just you heal over that time the same way you heal overnight. I understand that, and I understand the argument behind that, but it still feels very much like a video game. There's no real reason for it to be there that you can't explain by mechanics. Just simply put, my problem with it is your wounds will not stitch together because you sat on a log for an hour. Now, I understand that health is much like AC in Dungeons & Dragons, where it's abstract, but we had something happen where a person was we were traveling without a cleric, but we had a situation where a fighter, the other fighter in the group, went down, and all we had to do was get him awake, and we were able to rest for an hour, and he rolled actually what it was somebody criticaled on their medicine check to stabilize him, and essentially the GM figured it was enough to wake him up. Well, then he goes and he does his rest roll, which essentially put him at max. Now, this is a character who was reduced to 0. He was incapacitated from, like, 2 blows. So, like, he has 2 big, like, sword gashes in him. But because he sat there for an hour, those are gone, or they no longer matter. He's no longer injured. That doesn't make sense. That's a video game mechanic. That's a heal over time mechanic, and that's really dumb. The same kind of goes for the whole second wind thing. The whole fact that, sure, in the middle of combat, fighter gets to roll D12. Great, I maxed it out. I'm pretty much at full health, and I leave the combat, and I'm still all the way at full health. I went into the combat almost dead. I rolled that, and I'm just peachy. I'm better than I came in here with. Adrenaline and sitting on a log does not stitch your wounds back together. It does not stitch your flesh or set your flesh. It does not magically heal you. So that bothered me. I don't like these healing surge things. It's not realistic. All it is it's emulating video games, because I've played in systems where healing is not a thing. Adventuring is supposed to be dangerous. And when you go without a healer, that just impresses upon you how much more dangerous your situation is. You either, seek out healing, or you get yourself potions. You do something to prepare for that. Or you take just somebody with a healing skill with you that they can stabilize you so that you can drag those people back to town or to relative safety. I mean, it's fine. It's workable. As a mechanic, I understand the reasoning behind it. I don't agree with the reasoning behind it, but it's easily made. Like, pretty much the second wind thing, I'd probably tweak that where that gets you temporary hit points. Like, any hit points you get back with second wind, as soon as you end that combat, they're gone. Or with the resting thing, again, I can... It's kind of like sleeping overnight, and it's true. Humans do have regenerative abilities, but those take weeks or months at a time, not an hour. So, I don't know. I'd probably tweak that. Like, you have to succeed like a Constitution roll even to get that healing surge, or same thing. Those are temporary hit points that will tick off. Like, 1 hit point, you'll lose 1 hit point an hour of those temporary hit points. Something like that, because otherwise that does not make sense, and it is only there for a mechanical purpose, and in my opinion detracts from the game because it takes you out of that situation and removes the risk of what you're doing. That was my biggest problem with it. Other than that, I did have a couple other problems. Like, apparently according to these rules, there's no such thing as fumbles anymore. If you roll a natural 1, it's a natural fail, but it's not a fumble. There's no more fumbles. And in fact, halflings, or at least the halfling in the pre-made set, has some ability called Lucky that allows them to never fumble ever. There's some questionable abilities there that, again, it seems like it just needs some tweaking. Some fine tweaking to at least set it to the style I'm used to running in. I mean, for groups, from what I saw, for groups of players who like the mechanics, the Munchkin groups out there, you should have a blast, because very smooth, very nice mechanics. Just bothers me because, role-playing is the main thing for me. Which, to its credit, one thing I did like a lot was it does seem to have a lot of things that inform your backstory. I like this whole type thing of take to your class, because that's kind of how it always was, only they made it like more concrete now. Because you could, like, the reason why I don't care for the barbarian class is that you can be a fighter and be a barbarian. or you don't need the swashbuckler or the what other random class, like the swashbuckler, the gladiator, the barbarian. You don't have to have a separate class for all of those, because a fighter fits into all of those. You can be a fighter and be those things. So I like that they added the types to it, because that makes that whole notion a little more concrete, that you can be those things. And plus, I imagine there will be lots of I imagine DM's guy will probably have rules for making your own subtypes. So I like that. I liked that a lot. It seems like from what I've heard, it seems like it's pulling stuff from the like what Pathfinder did, where you can pick background things that'll affect that'll just slightly tweak how your character runs. I like that stuff. That's all good. I mean, I understand little mechanical tweaks based on background stuff. Great. I have no argument with that. Because it reinforces the actual character, what's there. You got that because your character did that. So it encourages you to play your character that way. Unless you're literally doing it just for stat bonuses, in which case you're missing the point. But just go find your group that doesn't care about that. Fine. Other things, let's see. Advantage and disadvantage. That was a big thing that was different. Essentially, much like in Numenera, there's a lot of positioning, there's a lot of encouragement to think through situations, because you're trying to gain advantage on the enemy. There's a thing called advantage and disadvantage. When you gain an advantage, like let's say you're on steps and your enemy is below you and you're attacking down at him, you would have advantage. That means when you roll to hit the enemy, you get to roll 2d20 and take the better action. Now, when your enemy is attacking you, since he's below you, he's at disadvantage. That means he rolls 2d20 and he has to take the lowest roll. And it's in there that you can, essentially, it's like you're constantly thinking how to gain that advantage to, gain that extra d20 to roll. So it encourages players who don't already think that way to think ahead and think through, their plans on what to do. What else? Other differences I noticed: the saves are different. Your stats now are your saves. It pretty much just whenever a save is called for, it just goes to whatever your related stat is, and you roll against that, and that makes perfect sense. It was still using, in this version, it was using floating DC and positive AC, which, to my understanding, that's supposed to be moddable in the player's handbook. You're supposed to be able to use THAC-O instead if you want, which that's what I'm looking forward to because I'm used to that. But it was using that now, it's fine. I like that they changed the saves over to those because, for me, systems where you roll against your stat instead of rolling against a floating number always made sense to me, and that'll be easily adjustable if it's not flat out one of the options for mechanics in the player's handbook. What else? It didn't really come into play, but I guess the book described it means that there's a reward that DMs can give to players for role playing their character well. That we didn't really, the DM running it he didn't have it figured out, or at least he couldn't find what it's supposed to be. But to me, it sounded like D&D finally incorporated its Benny points, hero points, whatever you want to call fate points, whatever you want to call them. And if that's the case, that's fine. I've always liked those systems. For DMs that are new to it, be careful how often you give those out. They will, number one, they will screw you over when you're trying to do something because they empower the players a lot. And number two, they'll quickly become pointless advantages. I've always liked that there's a penalty for using those essentially to encourage them to use it when they need it and not just whenever. But that's supposition. I don't actually know that they added many points, but what else? Also, there was the skill chart was changed a whole bunch. A lot of skills were cut out. A lot were combined into new things. It's perfectly fine. I liked how the skills were. It seems pretty straightforward. Anything that you want to do, you can assign to something. Or you can easily figure out what it goes to. And even if you can't find the skill for that, you just fall back onto a skill check, or onto an ability check. Make it a save. Boom, done. But they did that, so there's no more search or spot. That was turned into perception, which, in my opinion, makes the most sense. I don't even know. I personally think by this point, perception should really be a skill, but, I mean, they associate it to wisdom, so I guess you can just use wisdom, but I don't know. That always made sense to me as an actual skill to or an actual statistic to have. But, let's see. They did that. You also have a passive perception now, which is it's a set number based upon your stat that essentially informs the game master of how aware you are when you're not paying attention. So, like, if you're just walking, traveling between places, and something's going on in the woods, you have your set score. So, like, let's say if, like, a goblin's trying to sneak by your party so he doesn't get caught, the goblin would roll a stealth check, and, if it's above, or if it's below anyone's passive perception, then those people will notice him going by. Or if it's above, essentially, for a DM, you would want to get everyone's passive perceptions and, like, have it on a card, so whenever you need to see if they notice something, all you do is need to roll, and boom, done. You, and you notice this. They don't have to roll perception or spot or anything like that. You're just done. Got it. Now, when they are actively looking for things, then you could make them roll and make them roll to see if they notice things. I like that. It does make it go a little bit faster, having that passive number to go off of. Let's see. Combat seems really simplified, in that... Well, then again, I didn't make the character. Everything was all pre-generated, and all the bonuses and everything, but... I will say that it almost seems like they added those healing surges and things for when you don't have a healer. And our group didn't have a healer, so we used them. But at the same time, it also seems like they upped the difficulty of monsters. Like, we came across goblins. That should have been real easy for us. But, those goblins took us down took a couple of us down. Like, hell, the mage got one-shotted. That's not that big of a surprise. But then the fighter got taken down with a couple of blows from a goblin. And then we came across a bugbear. Spoilers. We came across a bugbear, and he... fortunately, we took care of him before he attacked us, but we just wrecked him. We took care of him before he hit us, but he would have wrecked us with how strong his swings were. Also, mage spells seem to the 3/5 Pathfinder. Well, I guess fourth. The more modern edition side of it, where even at first level, their spells are pretty powerful, actually. In the older editions, it was, you had spells, you had attack spells, but you had to be clever with how you used them, otherwise they would be very ineffectual. Granted, any mage over time becomes super powerful with the spells that they can cast, but you had to use them intelligently in the older editions, otherwise you were very ineffectual. You had to think, which is appropriate for the class that you're playing. Now the spells are... they're overpowered compared to older ones, but then it seems like there's been a bit of escalation. They've given starting player characters a little bit more a little bit more strength, but they've also at the same time made monsters a little harder. So, I mean, it's okay. It makes it a kind of exaggerated sort of feel. I don't know. For me, it's like at this point, D&D is kind of becoming more of an anime or a comic book versus an actual like fantasy novel, or at least it's emulating an anime fantasy adventure or a comic book fantasy adventure versus a fantasy novel fantasy adventure. But we're talking in the mechanic things anyway. Point is, my impression of it, I don't have all the information. I need to get the book and read it over before I give you a full critique. But my impression of it right now is that the system, at least the tailor-built version that was in the starter set, very serviceable. It was fun. It was a fun, quick system. I liked some of the changes that they made. I really don't care for these healing surges things, or at least how they're currently handled in the starter set. But everything's perfectly serviceable. Little tweaks here and there would fine-tune it into a good system. I'm planning on picking up the 5th edition book, not just to review, but because it looks like an entertaining system. I'm also curious to see, who or what their base classes and races are going to be, because there seems to be some question there. So I'm interested in that. I'll probably pick up 5th edition, and it sounds good, or at least just the player's handbook. And those are my impressions, guys. It's fun. Heck, give the starter set a try since it's for free. I will actually highly encourage anyone interested in GMing or getting someone new involved in role-playing. Now is the best time to do that because of the new edition. One, because it's a pretty good system to start with. It's a pretty good system, but also it's new. So if they take interest in it, they can explore the hobby as that game grows. So it gives them a nice base to start off of. So great. Plus, it's free, so it's a great time to get it and run those modules for new players if you want. But yeah, so I had fun. I'm planning on getting the system. I'll give you guys a full review when I actually get my hands on the book and read through. But that should actually only be a couple of weeks away. So, yeah. I'll also follow this up because you guys will probably be getting this Sunday. I am going on vacation for the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be visiting family down in Arkansas. So internet will be on and off. So the Lawful Evil episode, or the Lawful Evil episode of D&D Done Right will be delayed a little bit. But in the meantime, while I'm down there, I'm going to try and at least get you guys vlogs or something. But yeah, so if you don't get videos, that's why I'm on vacation where internet is dubious. If you do get videos, they're probably going to be like vlogs or something quick that I can give you guys. When I come back, you can reasonably expect Lawful Evil episode, though since I won't be home to film it, again, that'll probably be delayed. Look for that. It's going to be a little bit before you get that episode. I'll just be honest with you. It's going to be a little bit before you get that episode, but I'll bring you guys stuff when I get back. I've already run pretty long now, and I'm never really sure how to end these vlogs, so I'm just kind of trail off and look over here. Okay, bye. Wish me good.